Today we are going to have a great session with Dr. Peter Hudson, and I'm thrilled to see learn about the snow leopards.
Yeah, that's the beauty of being doing a session with Peter, because he's a photographer, he's a scientist, he know in depth about all these in both the subjects. So he's a conservationist, he's a scientist, and he's a photographer. You very rarely get a combination of these three along with a superb human. So
anybody can learn so much from him.
Yes, and a down-to-earth person.
Before bringing him, I will just talk a few words about Paws Trails. We will do the introduction about Paws Trails. Before that, I have to share this on Facebook so that more people can view. Yeah. Give me a second.
Yeah, let me also do the same.
So, welcome back to Paws Tales. This is our free webinar to educate and to share the experience with you all. Paws Trails is a collective collaboration of a group of dedicated nature lovers to bring humans closer to nature through the medium of photography and art. We have started this organization 6 years ago, and we have done 32 online magazines, International Wildlife Festival, 60 plus international photography workshops and lectures, 23 wildlife photography exhibitions. We have a collective social media followers of 1.5 million, and we have planted 40,000 plus saplings all over the world. We also have 200 plus international contributors who support us with their photographs, articles, videos, etc. And we also published 2 coffee table books. The first book was 101 big cats pictures from across the world, and we called it the Big Cat Trails. And the second book is based on the species found in the Arabian Peninsula, and the book name is the Arabian Trails. This is our so far journey, and this program, what we called as Paws Trails, is our new initiative to spread awareness and education. So now I think it's time for introducing Dr. Peter. Let me add him to the stream.
Good morning, everybody. Morning.
Hey, morning. How are you, PT?
Very good indeed. I'm in central Pennsylvania. It's the 4th of July, so it's America's birthday today. So we're going to I'm going to be with my grandchildren with some little fireworks and things at home to celebrate.
That's great. So, Nish.
Yes. PT, thank you so much. It's been a long journey. You are one of our member. We are, supporting us from all this while from the beginning, and we know you are busy all the time, and you are always there on a phone call or on an email or even from a text message. We don't know how to express our thanks to you for all your inputs and helping us along with all the people who follow us or looking forward some kind of support from our side. What you're doing is absolutely awesome, and we don't get to see people like you quite often in our life. So thank you so much, PT. And
we got to learn a lot of things from you, especially regarding the animal behaviors and
conservation side.
Yeah, and the conservation side, the importance of how important it is to conserve our planet at this point of time. A lot of things we did, a lot of trips together, and we learned a lot together. So we are waiting to hear from you about snow.
And beyond that, he is an awesome scientist and a Humanitarian of the Year award winner. So if I'm going to talk about Peter, I need another session to do that. So I'm just handing over to Peter. Thank you. Screen is all yours.
Thank you so much indeed. That's an exceptionally kind thing for you to say. Obviously, I am a scientist, and I work on emerging diseases. So as you can imagine, and particularly diseases that come from bats. So I have been very busy at the current time. But today we're going to talk about snow leopards. So let's get started with these wonderful, wonderful creatures that live in the high Himalayas. And this is what our current edition of Paws Trails Aware magazine is all about. What we're trying to do in Paws PT Aware is we're trying to bring conservationists and photographers together to try and increase awareness about so many of the wildlife conservation issues that we're facing at this moment. So I think it's very pertinent that we talk about the snow leopard at this juncture, because there is so much happening in the world and so much interactions between climate change and other things that this is a very opportune moment to talk. And I start with this beautiful photograph taken by Sasha, which is taken with a camera trap high up in the Himalayas. And this I think is a marking place. So he's put his camera close to this marking place, and as the snow leopard has come to mark the rocks, so he's captured this beautiful image. And I love the construction of this image with the flowers in the left-hand corner and the mountains in the background and the relaxed leopard looking at you. But we're going to talk today about this wonderful, enigmatic and elusive animal. And I want to start by taking you to the very top of India, to the northwest part of India in the Himalayan group. And here I'm going to take you from up into Ladakh, and particularly to the sort of northern part of Ladakh, to a place called Himashukupashin, where I stayed recently. In fact, I was there just before lockdown. I got back into the United States within hours of the lockdown. And we spent 3 weeks, myself and a couple of friends, looking and trying to photograph snow leopards. So I thought I would set the scene by looking at where this place is. In India, as Rishi Kumar Sharma has shown us, the quality of the habitat in this part of India is probably at its best. So if you want to see them, and even more if you want to photograph them, this is a place to go. But I must warn you, you're not going to photograph them every day. We saw them twice, which I think was great, but we had to work really hard to see them. Ladakh is a wonderful part of India. And this is dawn breaking over the capital of Ladakh, a place called Leh. And as the sun rises over the Himalayas, it comes through the prayer flags. Because, of course, the majority of people in this part of the country are indeed Buddhist. And it's possible for you to go to the monasteries and places to photograph the monks as they're saying their early morning prayers, and how the very first light comes through the monastery windows and just captures their hands and their prayers and their movement. And it's a very photogenic place, very photogenic people that you can see and watch. Here we see a novice monk cheekily looking back at me while they're meant to be at prayers, just to see what I'm up to. And it's a very hard place. This is very high altitude. There's not that much vegetation. It's cold for 9 months of the year. And the people live in a very rocky environment that is difficult to sustain oneself in it. But these people are wonderful. They're really gentle, kind, generous people. And my heart goes out to them when I go there. Here's somebody who is a grandmother of one of my friends out there, and getting the the sheep's wool together to get ready to make clothes from it. We were there during the festival, and there were some wonderful opportunities to photograph the people. So I'm sitting outside, and if you can hear birds calling, and that's a cardinal calling just behind me at the moment, these brilliant red birds, then you'll have to excuse me, but this was the best place to get the internet connection. The landscape is harsh. It really is quite a hard landscape, but the way that light plays across these dark rocks and how it hits the trees and the fence posts gives you a special opportunity to take some fine art photography, which captures the essence of this place. One of the tragedies is what climate change is doing there. Climate, and particularly snowfall, is very important to the ecology of this part of the Himalayas. It needs a good snowfall, and when the snow melts, the water comes off, the water comes over the hill, and then the vegetation can grow. And when the vegetation grows, it provides the resources for the herbivores, both for the wild herbivores, and there's some fantastic ones, and also for the domestic animals. But climate change is reducing that snow melt. It is reducing the size of glaciers. And this is a photo by my very good friend, Angus Fraser, taken of my close colleague, Imran. And Imran is a filmmaker that has dedicated his life to finding and filming snow leopards in the wild. I'm very fortunate to count him and his brother Gulzar as close friends. And so we spent several weeks together just looking and photographing snow leopards. What a wonderful, wonderful place and opportunity this was. Here's Gulzar pointing at what I would have hoped was a snow leopard, but it wasn't. But we would spend days. We would be up at dawn, out with the telescopes and binoculars, searching for the snow leopards. And as I said, in this 3-week period, we only saw them twice. But that's what you get when you try to photograph such elusive and wonderful animals. The camera equipment that I used a Sony a7R IV, which is a 61 megapixel camera. This means that when I take a photograph, I can blow it up, I can expand it. I used a Sony 600 millimeter lens with a 2x converter. So I was shooting at 1200 millimeters. And to do that, I needed an extremely solid tripod. And I used a really right tripod with a fluid head on it to give me as much stability as I possibly can. If you look in my left hand, I've got a shutter release so that when I'm on the animal, when I see the animal, I don't have to touch the camera or the tripod. I can take the photograph. I do much of my post-processing in a software called Capture One, which I find very, very good. It's really outstanding, and I think better than Lightroom. But I also use some software called Topaz software, and this software is, particularly the denoise, is really, really fabulous at removing any noise in your photograph. And you may well get a lot of noise at higher ISOs. And I also use something called Topaz Gigapixel, which allows me to upscale the photograph, and it uses artificial intelligence to do that. So I'm just telling you that because I think if you want to go and photograph snow leopards, you should know that you should be using 1200 millimeters really to take these photographs. Here is a really good photograph by Manan, and it captures some of the problems and issues we have faced when we're trying to take a photograph. If you look right in the middle of the photograph, you'll see the snow leopard on the rocks, right in the very center of the photograph. But here Manan is facing some of these big photographic challenges. We've got very dark rocks, we've got brilliant white snow. How do you get your exposure right? The animal is at a long distance. How do you be able to capture the animal when it is so far away? This is classic problem. This is classic when you're trying to photograph snow leopards. Ranga had more opportunity when the animal is in a dark area or in a clouded place. Then it's easier to pick out the animal as it moves is swiftly and carefully across these very steep, rugged cliffs. Of course, here Gaurav has had the great opportunity of catching a snow leopard right out on a snowfield. And that's just wonderful, although once again, you're still facing some serious problems with exposure and how you deal with that snow. One of the ones I like are when the snow leopard actually comes up onto the skyline and the snow leopard breaks the horizon. And here my very good friend Todd Gustafsson, who is without doubt one of the world's greatest photographers, and I would strongly recommend you look at his photographs and the sort of work he's currently doing with his wonderful project at the moment. He has captured the snow leopard as it breaks the skyline. My very first observations of snow leopards were in fact in a very similar situation. On the left-hand side, this female snow leopard broke the skyline. One of the spotters with us saw it, and I went to take a photograph. And as I took the photograph, I heard this wonderful call, ow, ow. And from the right came these two baby snow leopards bounding across the rocks. And I was unaware they were there, so I cut off the tail of the second one, but I caught the first one as it did this wonderful bound between these two rocks. Fantastic creatures. And when you see them, your heart goes fast, you get covered in goose pimples, and it is without doubt one of the most exciting times of your life. Here is another female with a couple of cubs. This one was fortunately quite close, only about 500 meters away. And they were on the top of this hill where they just slept until it was dark. And behind them, of course, you can see a glacier there. But beautiful, beautiful animals to photograph. One time we were watching this female with her two cubs, and these are two cubs. I'm sure you will see this cub up here as it's jumping up the cliffs, and I was trying to get this photograph, but below it is his sister, and his sister is just down here, just lying there behind the rocks. Obviously, I wanted to capture him as he jumped across that part of the rock. And what he's doing is trying to escape from a male that has just moved in. And if the male sees them, he will indeed kill the cubs to bring the female into season. In fact, what happened was the female chased him off. Here's another great way of getting a photograph. This is another one of Sasha's exceptional photographs. This is where you identify a place where they come and mark. And this is typical. An overhanging rock like this is just the sort of place that a snow leopard will come and mark. It's sheltered from the environment, and it's an obvious place where the snow leopard will come and smell, see who's been through, show who's about, and show whether they're in season. And it will also say who that individual is. So this is a great photograph by Sasha capturing this behavior. And by using camera traps, you can get some really superb shots. You're not a kilometer away. You can have your camera just a few meters away. This is a beautiful photograph, I think, by my friend Imran. And I want to talk a little bit about the amazing biology of these animals. They have incredibly thick fur on their belly and across them. This fur is like 7 centimeters long, and it's made to capture the air inside their fur, so keeping them very warm. They have about 25,800 hairs per square inch, a phenomenal density. But boy, do they need it when they live in some of the harshest environment in the world. They have specially adapted nose and nares, which allows them to suck in cold air, and then they have a heat exchange system in their nasal cavity so that the cold air coming in is warmed by the outgoing air, and so it keeps them warm. Absolutely remarkable. They also have special genes which allow them to live at these enormous altitudes. 19,000 feet. Gosh, I can't even do that in, that must be 6,000 meters, I think, something like that, 6,000 plus meters. And they have special ability to carry oxygen and keep that oxygen in their blood when they're at such high altitudes, and oxygen is so sparse. See the size of their paws as well. They're about 10% of the body size when you compare it to something like tigers, which is just 6% of their body size. So these are really, really huge paws made for walking across snowy conditions. And as Sasha shows here, they have this remarkably long tail, one of the longest, indeed the longest tail with respect to their body size of any of the big cats. And they use this to help them balance when they're chasing goats up and down these vertical cliffs. They need it as a balance, but they will also wrap it around themselves when they are very cold. Let's move on to the prey species. And this is a photograph that we took this year, and it's an ibex being pulled down by a snow leopard. It was about 2 kilometers away. And it was really, really difficult to see. So when I showed you the photograph earlier of the 2 cubs climbing up the hill, this is their mother. She hid out there, and suddenly she bounded out and caught this huge male ibex, which she then killed and ate and allowed her cubs to come down and see. And I think there are very few photographs that really capture a snow leopard actually capturing a wild prey species. Very difficult photograph to actually get. And Imran needs a lot of credit for being able to get this photograph. Of course, they feed on the large number of herbivore species that live in the mountains. And here are urial. They come down every day to water. They'll come down at the end of the day, coming down these steep black cliffs, and the snow leopards will try and wait for them as they're climbing up and down. They're looking nervous, and quite rightly, so they should do. Snow leopards are about, and snow leopards will try and catch them if they can. And there's multiple other species, obviously the ibex, blue sheep, Tibetan wild asses, many different types of animals up there. But look how little vegetation there really is in these places. But while you're waiting and watching, look for the snow leopards. Obviously, you look to see where these animals are. And you position yourself to see to watch these animals and then see if you can see a snow leopard crawling up on them. Because the best thing you can do is to try and find a place where the snow leopard has made a kill. If it has made a kill, it invariably comes back. And that's how Angus managed to get this photograph, to kill this blue sheep, and then he'd come back the following morning to see if there was any food left. And Angus managed to position himself something like 300 meters away and capture some wonderful photographs. But this prey is also the heart of the problem. Because there isn't so much water, water coming from snow melt, so the vegetation is weak and the prey species are being reduced in numbers. At the same time, there is competition between the sheep and the other animals. So this is a Tibetan nomad out on the Tibetan Plateau, and she's feeding her sheep at the end of the day, and goats as well. And of course, they're very valuable animals because they use these goats to make the wonderful pashmina scarves and things like this. To try and stop the snow leopards coming in, and they will persecute the snow leopards. But there has been some wonderful action by the Snow Leopard Trust, who worked out a number of ways we can try and reduce that sort of conflict. In many situations, the extent to the shepherding has these sort of holding areas to keep their sheep in, and the Snow Leopard Trust have been working with them to make them snow leopard proof, because by putting wire over the top, the snow leopard can't get in, because if the snow leopard does get into one of these corrals, they would kill the whole herd. They just go crazy when they get into them. So the Snow Leopard Trusts have done a lot to try and change that. And they've also arranged ways of giving payments to people whose animals suffer from being killed from snow leopards. And a very good system it is as well. There is a growing problem out there, and that really comes from the dogs that are out there. And this is a Tibetan Mastiff, which is a very, very vicious dog used for controlling the herds against wolves and snow leopards. But they have been, there's a lot of feral dogs out there. The Indian Army, which has got a huge presence out there, and you may know this, recently China infiltrated into Ladakh with the Chinese army. And so the Indian Army feeds these dogs to act as guard dogs and watch dogs around their campsites. And when they're not being fed there, they're off chasing some of the prey species. And while we were there, we heard of a snow leopard kill, rushed to see where it was. And by the time we got there, the dogs had already found the kill, chased the snow leopard off, and were eating the dead urial in this instance. And there are some real issues here that need to be looked at and need to be put right. Dogs are having a big problem. So the conservation status, it is listed by the IUCN as a vulnerable species. It was considered threatened for a very long time, but it's recently been put down to vulnerable because there's so much uncertainty about how many there are, what's happening to the population. And the Snow Leopard Trust have said that that is not the right approach. So there's some argument about what its status should be. If we look at the habitat, we know it lives in high rugged habitat, but for this animal, the nice thing is there's very little habitat fragmentation issues. So we think that these snow leopards, which will often disperse hundreds of kilometers, young males, can be able to do that without passing across other habitat. There's about 3,200 of them at the moment, but there's a lot of error in this estimate, and it could be twice that, or it could be less than that. But the population, we think, is decreasing about 11% every 10 years. And it's very difficult to make these estimates because some snow leopard home ranges can be as small as 5 square kilometers, while others can be up to, particularly in parts of China, 400 square kilometers. That's absolutely huge. They live in the wild for about 15 years. They have about 2 young. They reach sexual maturity at 3 years of age, breed every other year. So the generation time is about 7-8 years. The conservation issues are that we're really worried about the loss of wild prey because of climate change, conflict with livestock, and because of this depredations by the dogs, by these feral dogs. And there's this lot of disturbance and retaliatory killing. And once again, the dogs come in here as being a nuisance. There has been illegal trade in fur and bones, and people will send fur and bones to the Chinese medical markets, much as they do with tigers. So that's an issue that really needs to be stamped on pretty hard. At the same time, there's a lot of resource extraction, which is causing disturbance and causing issues. But the Snow Leopard Trust and others have put into account a number of conservation actions. Active prevention of livestock depredations by covering those areas. They've increased education and awareness, which is excellent. And there's ecotourism, which has had a substantial effect on the income of the local people in these areas and affected the schools and the health system. So ecotourism and you going and visiting these areas, putting money into these areas is very important. There's also been a move to protect areas throughout the range. But what can you do as an individual to try and help the snow leopard? Well, obviously the actions of the Snow Leopard Trust depends on donations. So I think giving donations is a good thing to them. You should, of course, reduce your own climate footprint. I mean, just having a vegetarian diet helps a lot by reducing the number of cows. Using your bicycle instead of a car is also a good thing. So any way you can reduce your climate footprint is going to have a beneficial effect on the whole world. And one thing I think is important, which is what we're trying to do here, is to increase awareness about the plight of the snow leopard and this Himalayan ecosystem. These leopards are flagship species. People don't think about Ural blue sheep or the other animals, but the snow leopard is so enigmatic that if this is a flagship species. So let's focus our emphasis on this. Let's get people excited about these snow leopards. And you can do this in your community, even if your community is here in central Pennsylvania or back home where I come from in Scotland. So that's the end of my talk. And I'm just going to finish here with a short film, just showing these beautiful animals at dusk as they break away and walk into the setting sun. This is a beautiful location, a beautiful place. And it's somewhere that you understand that we're talking about climate change, ecosystem, interaction with people. So Hermes and Nisha, thank you very much for inviting me. I enjoyed these talks, although I wish I could see the people in my audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Piti. As always, you rock.
Thank you, Nisha.
Very informative, beautifully.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
You literally took us to the in front of snow leopards.
Yeah, it really is fantastic, really great. And, you know, when we go to Africa or when we go to photograph tigers, we're in a vehicle, we're photographing from this, but, you know, we would be climbing 17,500, 18,000 feet, climbing for 3 hours, carrying cameras in very low levels of oxygen. And when you did see one, you felt you deserved it. It was really, really fabulous. And very lucky to be with Imran. And he's such a good photographer, filmmaker, dedicated his life to the conservation of issues in Ladakh. And he and his brother Gulzar are just fantastic people to spend time in the mountains.
That's great. You know,
how did you plan all this trip? Particularly this snow leopard trip?
So I talked a lot to Gulzar and to Imran, and we decided that one of the best things was to be in a very small group. So myself and two friends, Randy and Angus, we went with them, and then we decided to stay at a homestay so we could support the local community and things. But then we brought our own cooks and vehicles, and we wanted to be really flexible so that if somebody saw one miles away, and in one case it was 100, 200 kilometers away, we just got up in the middle of the night and just drove, then climbed to the top of the mountain where the shepherd had been sitting. And he said, sorry, it's gone. There's the dead sheep. And we came all the way back again. It was tough, but it was, that's what you've got to do. So being in a very small, flexible group makes it more expensive because there's, you know, it's just one chef for us, and we had to work really hard. But I really respect Imran and Gulzar and the ways to do it, and I followed their advice.
So what kind of lens or what kind of range you think your gear should be?
Well, I think you've got to be shooting over 1,000 millimeters. So you've got to be, you know, and of course you can't afford, nobody can afford a 1,200 millimeter lens. So you need a really good 600. Nikon 800 and Canon 800. But you know, that there weren't a touch on the Sony, in my opinion. And so Angus was shooting with the Canon 800, Randy with the Nikon 800, and I just think that I was doing better with my Sony in that situation.
Yeah.
I think you need a full frame. I don't think you should go with a mirrorless. But sorry, I was shooting mirrorless, but I don't think you should go with a 4/3 or a crop sensor. I think you need a full frame sensor, high megapixels, and you've got to try and make sure there's no shake. And even though you're sitting there in pre-dawn, freezing at sort of -10, -15, then the sun comes out, and then there's heat shimmer. And you know, if an animal is 2 kilometers away, you can't like that kill. There's heat shimmer issues with that on that Angus's shot of the kill. But we saw it. Wow. Wow.
That's all about it. You know, you get to see a snow leopard kill. It's, as you said, it's absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
Any adventurous things happened in this trip?
Well, I did 4 adventurous. I did slip on a frozen river.
Oof.
I fell very badly and slipped down. And fortunately, I had a wonderful driver, and he caught me. And before I went zoom over the cliff, so that was pretty adventurous. We went to the Tibetan Plateau and we spent time with the nomads there, and we saw some fantastic things there. Imran and Gulzawa, they said we were hoping to see Pallas's cat there, and that was truly inspirational. And I would be about to go back now if it wasn't for lockdown and the COVID problems. But the Tibetan Plateau is fantastic, but I don't think I get in anyway, because that's where the Chinese have invaded India at the moment. And dreadful situation. When, in all honesty, whenever we have a war-torn area, it is not good for wildlife. It is seriously not good for wildlife. So I worry about the prey species and the people. The people were just remarkable. Toughest people I've ever met in my life. Right, yeah. So the whole thing was an adventure. But I can tell you that when you want to go and do your number 2s, and it's really tough. When there's no toilets, there's nothing, and you just go -10, -15, blowing. That was the toughest thing. I think Angus would agree with me.
So there is no toilet facilities.
There wasn't in the Tibetan Plateau. It was just a case of finding a rock that nobody ever used. Sorry about this, but
it's always a problem for me whenever we have any trekking trips. It's absolutely a difficult scenario in my case too. So
very cold. And,
so what is the biggest challenge you faced in this trip? Can you?
Well, I would say that a lot of people suffer with the altitude sickness, but we spent a couple of days in Ladakh, and if you take the medicine, then that's okay. But when you come to climb the mountains, you have no energy. And so I would say climbing those mountains, and the trick for me is you just start slowly and you just keep going. And they used to call me the man of the mountains because I just would not stop. I just kept going, one step at a time, just pushing yourself all the time. And I kept thinking, if I get up that hill, I might see a snow leopard. If I can get up there, I might see a snow leopard. So you just keep going all the time. That's a real challenge. But I can tell you the delights when you get back to Leh, go to a hotel like the Grand Dragon, and you have a shower after 3 weeks. It's the most beautiful thing ever.
We have a question from Vinod Kumar. Does the tourism not affect the wildlife in a bad way, if not controlled in a good way? How can we make sure we do it in the right way?
So I totally agree with that comment. And it's very important that you don't disturb. And there are photographers who do cause disturbance. But the local people are really good at talking amongst themselves and saying, okay, you can stand here, but you can't do this, and you've got to be quiet. They work very hard to try and keep it under control. And I think the local people have a sort of agreement between them, so that if somebody sees a snow leopard, they radio the others, but it's very strict what you should do. So they've got it under control. But I do agree it can become a big issue, and I worry at times that we don't want to get to an issue where there's like 70 people trying to photograph a snow leopard. That's horrific. But that's partly why I went with Imran, because we were flexible. Some of these groups are 10, 15, 20 people, you know, and if they just want to turn the vehicles around, it takes them 3/4 of an hour. But with us, with one vehicle, we'd be turned around and we'd be in places and things like this. So I really, really enjoy being in a small, flexible group. It was the way to do it.
We also have a question from Aditya Krishna. How can a 15-year-old conservation photographer like me contribute towards conservation?
That is an exceptionally good, and it's a really important question. And I think what you should do is you should start a number of projects that are associated with conservation. This could be something quite simple that is in your local village, local backyard, in your town, wherever it is, but you see an issue and you start collecting photographs, different photographs of animals, different photographs of people and animals and interactions to illustrate that conservation issue. And then you put that project out there through websites and social media, different ways. I think that's one thing I would seriously recommend. But being involved with an organization like Paws Trails is here because collectively, with multiple people doing multiple things, we can have a really big impact together. And I think there's a lot of recognition and support for younger photographers in this respect. So I think there's a lot you can do. And I think, there have been issues with women, worried about going on some of these trips. But now with people like Nisha leaving these trips, the women feel safe and they can come. And I think it would be good to have more younger people involved bit by bit. So, if you're 15, you're at just the right age for doing some very cool stuff. Start locally, think globally, but you're the future. You're the people we're trying to save the planet for. So work with us, and don't think twice about emailing or sending a text to any three of us and saying, can you look at these photographs? What do you think? How do you think I should do this? So good luck to you. Excellent question.
And again, we have a section for kids under 16 years, and it's called Cubs Corner. You can always get in touch with any of us, and we can surely guide you from our perspective. But the implementation is completely on you and your ideas, and we are always there to support you.
Support and guide in whatever ways.
Yes.
We have a question from Saumi Kayari. At present, with the growing number of wildlife photographers, the visit to all sanctuaries, national parks are increasing every day. Does it create a disturbance or affect the wildlife or wild animals in any way?
Well, it depends how those numbers are dealt with, and it depends on the behavior of the people and the guides.
Yes.
That's very important. So, I could take you to Yellowstone, and I go to Yellowstone a lot. I work out there, and I have, so I go there several times a year, and I see some dreadful people behaving very badly. But there are a lot of rangers there trying to stop you and trying to keep people under control. But the incredible thing is, you walk 100 meters away from your vehicle, and you don't see anybody after that. In America, everybody wants to be next to their car, so they stay there. So I think the impact in Yellowstone is just down some of these, just down the roads. But once you get into the wilderness areas, there's very little impact. Now, I have been to some of the tiger parks in India to photograph tigers, and I've seen it in Africa as well. Some of the guides behave very badly, I think. They do not respect the animal. So for me, the best thing, and this is so rewarding, to see an animal. So I was out last night photographing black bears in the woods behind my house, and it was just getting dusk, and this young black bear was there, and I hadn't seen it, but it stood up and looked at me, and I just very quietly moved away slowly, and he goes, "Oh, okay," and carried on eating its way and making its way. And I just slowly removed myself from the situation. I came back so far and it wasn't worried because I'd increased that distance. But to be able to see the animals, not disturb them, and then to pull back and know that those animals have carried on their normal behavior, I find a reward. And I wish people could realize it's the interaction with nature that's important, not catching the shot, but catching the shot in a way, because that shot belongs to you and to your heart. And to know that you behaved ethically and to know that you went in there and did this with the animal's permission is so much better than pushing an animal until it gets so cross with you it snarls. And I've been in tiger parks in, as I said, when the driver says, "Do you want to see it snarl?" And I go, "What do you mean? I can drive to the animal." I go, "No, you mustn't. Stay here. Let me take it." And I've been in Africa when people have said, when you're restricted, you have to be on the road, photographing lions from the road. And they go, "Do you want to get closer?" I go, "No, we'll wait and see if the lions come closer to us. I do not want to go there and disturb the animals." So it's important for you to make sure your guides behave properly. And I think report guides who behave badly. And I like to see in Africa the system where the guides control each other. That's an important thing. So it's a very big question. It's a very big ethical issue. I think we can do this. Animals that are not disturbed or persecuted tolerate humans in the way they behave, as long as we do it ethically and right. So I think there's a big role to carry on doing that sort of thing. I also quite like the way in India, the parks are open and they're cheaper for local people and children to go. And there's a time period that those people visit them. And I think it's good if there's another time period that photographers and naturalists and people can sit and watch the animals quietly without hundreds of people being there. And I think you can do that, and I think you can manage that. And I don't think many places have got that right yet, but I think that can be done.
And in India, I think there is one more thing. There is a restriction in most of the parks that only so many vehicles are allowed on a day. So beyond that, they don't give the permission. To some extent, that also help, because even if you want to go, even if you have a plan, if you don't book it in advance, then it will not work.
But yeah, tell me.
No, you go, Hermes, please.
No, what I was saying is there are a lot of things that I think, again, lack of awareness, that people don't know how to behave in front of an animal. That's because they're not aware about what will happen to them or their behavioral changes or something like that. Also, we need to address this issue. Like, we need to educate them. I hope that is also a big major thing.
Yeah.
So I was really surprised at some of the places near Bangalore when I went. There were carloads of people with incredibly expensive equipment, 20, 30,000, but all they were interested in was getting the shot. And it was chasing the animals down to get the shot. I want a black leopard and I'll do anything to photograph a black leopard, rather than just relaxing and, going quietly. People often say to me, "Well, I'm going to Africa. What's the best way to photograph some amazing animals?" And I say, photograph birds, because if you start photographing birds, you'll suddenly realize the mammals are there and you'll get some fantastic shots.
We have a question from Karthik. It's a very tricky and interesting question. Hi, Peter, Nisha, and Hermes. According to you, who is a wildlife conservationist? There are people who call themselves as wildlife conservationists.
PT, start with you.
So this is a very, as you say, very difficult question. So I was in Svalbard last year, and this woman said, if you're a wildlife conservationist, you shouldn't be coming on a ship to photograph polar bears because the ships are using fuel, you've traveled here by plane, etc., etc. So there are issues. And I spent a long time thinking about her comments, and I decided that one of the best things, that what I wanted to do was increase awareness. I want to use my photographs to write books, to give talks, things like this. There are things that I can do, and there are things that I can't do. But I think that decides who a conservationist. A conservationist is a person who really thinks about their impact. And it's no doubt that we all have impact in the world and in the environment, but you have to think about how you're going to mitigate that. So, you know, I've driven my vehicle this morning. I couldn't have cycled, I couldn't have done other ways, but I'm going to find ways to mitigate that, and I will, you know, change my diet, and I will do other things which I think will help. But I justify the fact that I use my vehicle to come and use this internet because I think it's important that the world is aware about conservation issues, and that I think the benefits of giving this talk outweigh me using my vehicle today.
And I think, yeah, I agree with PT on everything what you mentioned. You being a photographer and contributing to conservation can be you using your images to spread awareness, be it on social media, be it on a conservation project, or donating your images to conservation organizations. All these things you can do as a photographer. And you being a simple human, simple person, the basic thing, you can put only your life as an example. I changed to vegetarian. Now from vegetarian to vegan, it's all thinking one thing. One small action can make a major impact in the footprint what we are creating in this world. And being a vegetarian can make a major difference. So that's step number one, which I took. Then we plant trees wherever we go. And we make sure that the people who are traveling with us also planting trees. And you know, so there are simple you carrying a water bottle along with you so that you don't have to use the plastic bottles. You carry a bag with you. All these things can help in conservation. So if you're talking about conservation photography, donate your photographs, spread awareness, start it from your home, start it from your life. And
the question that which Karthik asked, there are people who call themselves as wildlife conservationist. I would say, see, let them call themselves as conservationist, but the only thing is they have to do something, like they have to act something towards like some kind of conservation. Then it's fine, like everyone can call themselves as a conservationist. That is what we want. Everyone has to be a conservationist. So in that case, this planet will be a better place to live.
Yeah.
So it's also about influencing other people. So if you think about things like when people stopped smoking, there was a very rapid change. Now, this is in my mind. When I was young, there was anti-smoking in the United Kingdom, and very quickly a lot of people stopped smoking. In a similar way, I remember there was this movement by Friends of the Earth to try and stop people wearing fur coats. And within a matter of a few months, the fur coat market just went because it became no longer socially acceptable. And I wanted to be no longer socially acceptable to do things which impact the environment and impact wildlife. And I think people, when they see problems with habitat loss and illegal persecution of animals, that should just be considered not acceptable. And I want more people in the world to stand up. If I go to Sweden, most of the people will stand up. I have some very good, well, you know, people like Frederick and Melissa. They're just wonderful people. And they changed their battle, partly because of the administration in this country at the moment, partly because of other things. But it's that needs to change.
Yeah, politics play a major role in most of the countries, and the mentality given to every politicians and every homes, I think, and at least we should save the next generation. And important as maths and language, conservation should be a subject which need to address from school level.
Nelson Mandela, who is definitely one of my heroes, used to say, "Give me education and I will change the world." That is the biggest tool that we can do. Just educate people, educate more women to higher levels of education, get people through university, get more higher proportion of women educated. We could change the world in a generation. I think it's the simplest thing we can do.
Yep.
We have one more question from Sumedha Biswas. How is climate change affecting the habitat and lives of snow leopard?
Well, primarily the climate change, the warming there, just even a few degrees have reduced the amount of snowfall. The snowfall is stopping the water runoff, which is stopping the vegetation, increasing competition. The people in many parts of the country can no longer keep sheep and goats because of that. The wildlife is going, it's becoming concentrated into smaller areas. It's a huge issue. And one of the things that I'm learning in my own research is that it's often not climate change together, but it's climate change interacting with another variable. So climate change interacting with livestock production, climate change interacting with habitat loss, and makes the situation much, much worse. So I think it's very important that we work against climate change, but we also need to see what the secondary and tertiary factors are that interact with climate change.
Great.
We checked Facebook and YouTube for questions, right?
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.
So then the next one is going to be our next edition. That's going to be on 8th of July. And this time Manu is going to do a presentation on macro. So we definitely need be here. We're going to come up with more activities. Hermes, do you like to say something on that note?
I would, on that note, I'm fine, but I would like to announce one more thing. Like Peter is our editor for the magazine PT Aware. So this edition was Snow Leopard, and our upcoming edition is the Indian Great Hornbill. Right, PT?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
We request everyone who are watching and everyone who will watch this to submit their photographs so that we can publish it in our magazine next editions.
So through the website?
Yeah, through the website, pawstrails.com. Yes.
So as I mentioned once again, if you're interested in macro, you would like to know about these small little wonders, stay tuned for 8th of July, same time. We'll be back with more and more in future.
And also please subscribe to our channel, Paws Trails, this YouTube channel, Paws Trails Official.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, PT.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.